Hi. In this tutorial, we'll use the automatic nesting features that are built into ToolShop. This can save a lot of time if you have many parts to nest. The reason we show you the manual methods first is so you can build on your understanding bit by bit. Now that you have seen the previous tutorials, you will easily comprehend how to use the automatic nesting. First of all, let's open the same test file that we used previously. Remember, the cleanup and combine have been performed automatically as before. Next, we will select all parts. We can, of course, do this by dragging the selection rectangle around all of the parts. But there are a couple of shortcuts to that. On the toolbar right next to the selection tool is, you guessed it, the Select All button. But there's an even quicker way. That's by typing Ctrl+A. A quick memory aid is to remember you want to control all shapes. Once we have all the parts selected, we can activate the automatic nesting function. It's right here on the Layout toolbar. A dialog box will open up with a whole bunch of settings. Let's take a look through them. First, you'll see some familiar values for the gap and the margin settings. They're pretty obvious. Next, we have Rotate to Minimum Box. This is really a time-saving setting that I like to leave on. Essentially, if this setting is on, ToolShop will rotate each part until it fits into the smallest possible rectangle. This helps with nesting later on. There may be the odd time when you don't wish ToolShop to do this, however. For instance, you may have drawn a part to cut in a specific direction on the sheet. If you don't want the parts to be rotated, say, 5 degrees, because of the grain in the material, then you may want this setting turned off. The next settings are the sheet size. These are preloaded from the current sheet, so you don't need to do anything here. After that, we have the Nest over Multiple Sheet setting. Selecting No will only create a single nested sheet and will place any leftover parts above the sheet so you can later decide how to handle them. Selecting Yes will automatically add new sheets as they are required to fit all of the selected parts. It's normal to leave this setting turned on. Reset lead-ins and lead-outs is not applicable at this time because we haven't yet added the tool paths to this job. If we had already applied the tool paths, then it would automatically move the external lead-ins to the corner of the parts indicated here. The next setting is Nest Holes. This is useful if you have big parts with holes in them. This setting allows ToolShop to place smaller parts inside the holes in larger parts. Moving on, we have the default rotation setting. This is the smallest increment that ToolShop can nudge the parts by in order to fit them in. Making this setting smaller means there is a possibility of a more efficient nest, but it can take longer. Making this setting larger can speed up the process, but it may be less efficient with the material needed to fit the parts in. For most jobs, it is okay to leave this at 1 degree. Finally, in this section, we have the Fit Horizontally setting. This is pretty simple. If you say yes, then the parts will be laid out horizontally, starting from the bottom up. If you select no, then the parts will be stacked vertically starting at the left end of the sheet. In the next category, we have the Speed versus Accuracy settings. The accuracy setting is telling ToolShop how fussy it needs to be when nesting. It is usually fine to leave this at 20, but you could try other settings if you don't get the results you want. The Try to Nest in Gaps setting will attempt to push small parts into the gaps between other parts. It can take longer, but can lead to really good results if you leave it turned on. The last setting is called Rail Cuts. I'm going to leave this setting for another tutorial as it requires some setup to get it right. So once you have this set up, it's mostly set and forget. But there's one last thing that I recommend, and that's to save these settings as a nesting template. You can save as many nesting templates as you like with a name that makes sense to you. I like to give it a name based on the gap and margin. Here we'll call it 10 gap, 10 margin, but it could be any name that would help me identify this particular setup. Next time you come into the nesting dialog box, you can select these settings from the drop-down list at the top here. Let's give these settings a try by clicking OK. Here we see there are only a few parts on the screen. That's because ToolShop has created more than one sheet. Let's go to the sheet list and go back to the first sheet. I think that is a pretty impressive result. The more parts of various sizes in your job, the more efficient the nesting can be. Remember that ToolShop will output individual G-code files for each sheet in the job. We hope that this will make your life a lot easier when nesting jobs for your CNC machine. Next time, we'll discuss adding tool paths and setting lead-ins for whole nests.